Yeah, so here we are, uh, collecting up some fruits, some greenhouse goods. You'll notice these greenhouses that are built in Fallout New Vegas are number one, built of scrap material, probably from old mobile homes, old vehicles, um, uh, abandoned buildings, things of that sort. And these buildings, you'll notice there's a bit of refrigeration, so that's probably to keep it cool, and also to keep it hot at night. Um, there's also a boat, which could be used to hold water. Um, maybe for maybe when it rains, you set these out and they help to collect water and drain it into a cistern. And then here's the roof, which is made of a kind of net, a kind of mesh, meant to help soften the UV rays. And there's walls, of course, sturdy walls meant for blocking the direct path of bugs to your crops. All very important things to set up. And then the crops themselves are in raised garden beds. So one of the reasons you want raised garden beds is it's going to detract the amount of pests and diseases that your plant might have to worry about that might be harbored deep down in the soil. And these raised garden beds are more than likely made of a cement or a clay, but you'll notice there's some sheet metal, some plywood. They're a bit hodgepodge, but you probably don't need the most expensive equipment to make raised garden beds, considering the ancients made raised garden beds with just stones and dirt and clay and things of that sort. So, yeah, we're just collecting all this food. Believe it or not, this is like the jackpot. Normally you have to shop every 3 days and only scrounge what they got for sale. You go to the greenhouse, pick it directly, and you've got your hands on some of the best, freshest food in the entire Mojave. I myself have contemplated going to a local greenhouse and picking some crops. I try to grow my own stuff, but it often doesn't do too well. Although, last time my beans were totally demolished by a butterfly that got into the cage. And this time, it seems like the cage has remained fairly safe from most insect attacks. So I've got all kinds of pintos growing in there. So I'm very excited to see if those will actually fruit and bear seed so that I can plant more and probably consume a portion of the pintos as well. But I was very pleased to see that. Now, one of the things is when I planted those pintos, it was late summer, so it was cooler when they were growing than it normally is, and it was wetter. So they had quite a bit of mercy. If I had planted those in spring, I might have been looking at some dead beans. But one thing that surprised me is that the butterflies did not get to the beans this time. Normally that cage is an ideal place for butterflies, and they'll sneak in sometimes when and I don't mind. I love butterflies, so honestly if they eat up my beans, that's fine. I'd rather have a bunch of butterflies than a bunch of beans. Beans are honestly, there's people who grow beans probably more strategically and they got better strategies than I do. So you can always buy beans. They're pretty affordable, but it's just fun to grow your own stuff, and it's good to have fresh local food. So I got no problem with growing my own stuff, and when it's successful, I'm overjoyed. And beans are one of those plants that if you don't have the most green thumb out there, you might have some luck with some beans. Now, I'll tell you right now, I have my beans inside of a cage, so that could play a big factor into why this yield was more successful. That, and I planted late in the summer when temperatures were cooling down from the normal hundreds to 90 to 100, cooling down to 80 to 90, a lot cooler temperature. So, uh, yeah, that was nice that the beans were able to grow. Now I wasn't able to grow much else, not due to butterflies or anything like that, but due to my own fault. You see, what had happened is I planted some quinoa and amaranth, and right as it was getting started, I stepped on it and it did not recover from that. They say there's an old idiom that says a gardener's footprint does no harm to the garden. Well, sometimes it does. But you know what? My beans worked out fine. And some of the quinoa and amaranth is still growing, so that all hope is not lost down that department. And what I'm hoping to do is get another batch of seeds that I can plant more of. The food is great to eat. The livestock loves it, the bugs love it, everything loves quinoa and amaranth seed, and it's very good to grow it when you have from your own seed instead of buying seed from Peru, because the problem is in Peru in the mountains they grow quinoa and amaranth, but they need to eat that quinoa and amaranth to support their nutritional profile. And one issue that happens sometimes is a restaurant has all kinds of customers who want to eat quinoa and amaranth. I guess nobody wants to grow it in the States, so what ends up happening is people go to Peru to buy it cheap, and they pay a lot of money for it, but the problem is you can't eat money. So the people of Peru in the mountains who use this crop as a staple to their diet end up losing this staple to their diet. And yeah, they have money, but what are you supposed to do with money? What's money good for if it doesn't buy you food? So they end up with health issues from poor nutrition, and often it's due to some people say it's due to selling off that quinoa, and I would not be surprised if that's true. Quinoa is a high protein, high calcium plant. Anyways, what I'm getting at is it's good to try to grow your own quinoa, and if you can, grow your own seeds so that you can plant your own quinoa. I mean, you got to start somewhere, but it's good to try to be as self-sufficient as possible. And I'm not too sure if I can find distributors who distribute quinoa in the States where food's more plentiful, but definitely try to look for that in the future if I end up needing seeds again. I once purchased some, I believe it was called purple or pink amaranth. That was good stuff. I believe that was from the States, seed starter. And as far as I know, that's as edible as any kind of other quinoa or amaranth on the market. So there are ways to start your garden from seeds that are not somebody's food staple. And it's a wonderful plant. It's low on the water demands. It's a very interesting plant to watch grow. You see, most plants like the sunflower and the corn are very prim and proper. I don't know how to describe it. It's like they went to school. They have a certain behavior that's very rigid. When you look at a sunflower that's been, GMO'd or whatever, when you look at one of the more popular brands of sunflower like the Mammoth and the Black Oil, you'll notice there's this stiffness to them, and they retain their posture from night to day and day to night. And with the quinoa and the amaranth, they've got a more wild nature. So the sunflower is kind of like a supermodel. Like, it's got its poses, and it's always striking a pose all the time because its job is to look pretty. Well, the quinoa and amaranth, it's not a model. It's a survivor. So it does, and it behaves, and it looks in a fashion that is beneficial to its survival. So at night, when the predators are out, it uses its leaves to wrap around itself and protect its buds, its budding growths from any kind of sugar-sucking, hungry herbivore out there that wants to taste the sweet nectar directly from the fruit bud. So, so it's a very interesting plant because it will bloom every morning, and every night it withdraws within itself, and it wraps itself with itself, and it helps to shelter itself with itself, and it disguises itself, and it's just a really beautiful plant to be around because it's still in tune with its natural self. It hasn't lost its its original behavior due to the meddling of man. The sunflower, on the other hand, and I would imagine some species of corn, they always look the same as if frozen in a photograph, but you can feel their stress, you can hear their stress, you can, it's very obvious that they are not behaving naturally, and they know it, and you know it, but they gotta do what they gotta do in order for their genetics to live on, and in a society, there are certain laws we have to follow, and certain appearances we have to make, and the sunflower makes that very obvious. And I believe that its health suffers to that, and it's a very sad plant to look at. But the quinoa, very beautiful, though very, very beautiful, very in tune with its wild nature, very noble, very true to itself. And what more can you ask from a plant? What more can you ask from a plant? Yeah, that's. If you ever get the chance in your life, look at a quinoa in the day, and look at a quinoa or an amaranth at the night, and just, it has such a personality. Just watch it, watch all the different behaviors it has. It's a lot of fun to, it's a very fun plant to be around. And you can feel how much it treasures life. And how it puts life first above silly societal pretenses. Yeah, I absolutely love that plant. Another plant that's very similar in that sense is the oak. The oak is often a more wild strain, a more wild variety. And it often has a behavior befitting to its own natural process, to what it feels is true. It's a plant that's very true to itself, and I appreciate it for that. But on a micro scale, if you took life and just tons of years of and generations of a plant being in tune with nature, that quinoa and amaranth, those are great to be around. They're not quite used to civilized man and his taste for appearances. But I mean, there's tons of other plants out there, and they all behave different ways. But that sunflower, it's a real tearjerker. You can see what it wants to do, and it doesn't do it, because it does what it thinks people will perceive as correct. What else? What else is a fun
Always nice
plant?
to see you, baby. Bring me any new plants from outside. I love it when you talk like that. Let me just get that interface up and running for you.
Oh, marigolds. Marigolds are a lot of fun if you've never experienced marigolds. Yeah, especially crossbreeding them. That first generation that you plant is going to have a certain look and it's going to have a certain behavior that's very true to the plan or whatever, true to what it's been bred for. But you make a few crossbreeds, and all of a sudden, you're looking at a whole nother game. It's I've got some marigolds that their buds are large. The seed pods, just very substantial, and the not just that, but the flowers are large, and my favorite part is the foliage. The foliage is huge. The foliage is ginormous. And the reason I like that so much is it reminds me of like Jurassic Park or something. It's a very it's very strange plant. I have a suspicion that it might be from GMOs or something. I'm not too sure, but it's you definitely outside of like some plants that are very foreign to me, like bamboo, you don't see plants like that marigold very often, where they're cartoonishly large. See, where I'm from, a lot of plants, out of interest for survival, they miniaturize themselves and they compact themselves and they complicate themselves, so that when hard times come and water is to be lost, the water loss rates are not too substantial, not too bad. Low risk, low gain, but low risk, low chance of death. So a lot of the plants, they miniaturize, complicate, and just all around they downsize. They downsize their risks, downsize their footprint, and they just try to hold out, and survive. But those marigolds, on the other hand, they're very brazen. The ones that I think it might be a new species, the ones I got going, they're very bold, very brazen. They remind me of like an elephant or a mammoth charging full force forward, not looking, just charging and believing with full blind faith that things are going to work out. And it's beautiful in a way. It really is. It's something that I'm unfamiliar with my environment. So it's a very interesting thing to observe. And I'm looking forward to harvesting the seeds, should it pollinate, and spreading those seeds and seeing what else might transpire. It could end up being a very interesting genetic strain of plant yielding very interesting results. But I think over time, if it is to survive here for eons, generations, hundreds of years, it's gonna have to learn how to conserve a bit. It's going to need to learn how to reduce cost. That's my opinion. But who knows? Maybe its strategy of being big and bold will work out in its favor. Only time will tell. I know that the pollinators probably love it. Those big fruits that it's got, or big nectar holders, big bulbs. I don't know what they're called, but the big part that holds the flower, I forget what it's called, but I'm sure those are full of nectar, and that the butterflies love them, and the mosquitoes. But I think the whole point of marigolds is to basically distract the mosquitoes. It doesn't necessarily kill them. It might even feed them, but it's kind of fodder to them. It helps to distract them, keep them away from you. So I appreciate the marigold, and I like to have it as a plant around me. Only issue is I believe it's African in origin. The species that I like to grow, the Queen Sophia, and Africa actually rains more than I had originally thought, based on all those videos of drought. I think it might actually be drier here than it is in Africa, but in certain years. Maybe in Africa it's the same problem though. But either way, this marigold, its water demands are a lot higher than any of the local species. Now, while it smells wonderful, looks wonderful, and attracts wonderful bugs, it can be quite a labor-intensive plant to keep watered throughout the very hot summers. Basically, you gotta water it every day, and that's not really a problem, but it's it can be very it can be a lot compared to some of the local species. Some of the local species a little easier going. A gentle mist here and there, and they're good to go. One of the funky things, though, is the environment. It's a little more humid than some deserts, so it's deserty, so it doesn't rain, but it's humid, so it's quite a predicament. So like the mesquite, which grows in Nevada and Arizona, if you grow mesquite, the fruit will rot. And if you grow, so that's if you grow something dry that needs dry, hot climates. But if you grow something like, let's see, what needs wet, hot? Oh, if you grow coconut, you can grow coconut, but it won't rain enough that you can get a coconut. So it's a very strange predicament. It's very similar to what I imagine California weather to be like, where it's humid and it's hot, but there's very little rainfall. So it might make certain kinds of so like xeriscaping, for example. There's all these books on xeriscaping, and the issue is xeriscaping, for the most part, is focused mostly on the Arizona and Nevada areas where it's dry and it's hot, and we've got a wet, hot, humid heat. So see this mesquite, I mean this yucca. So what ends up happening with this yucca is, instead of cooking in the sun and properly drying out, the fruit and seeds would rot. So you would be eating just rotten fruit, which isn't good for you. Now the leaf, you could still use the leaf, and because molds and fungus like this environment, You could more than likely break down the leaves into a rope quite easily, as from my understanding, black mold is needed to produce rope from hemp, so you might be able to use it for yucca. Um, but yeah, a lot of xeriscaping, people interested in xeriscaping tried to make a living here, and yeah, they get paid, but the result is often horrendous because what ends up happening is they plant all these plants that are used to the desert, but this isn't quite a desert, it's more of a tropical desert. So so the yields are poor to none, and the loss rate can be high as well. Um, so it's quite an issue. Now I've noticed some plants do okay. Like for example, what's a good example of something that does okay? I grew a sweet potato for a while. That seemed to do okay. What else? Mesquites are good for their wood, not necessarily for the fruit. The college breeds a special type of mesquite that survives, that grows mostly wood instead of fruit. But I think, well, these pintos are doing okay so far. Now that's until they start ripening, and if I don't pick them in time, I gotta get lucky, basically. I gotta pick them in time for them to ripen, but not wait too long, because if I wait too long, it'll rain, and they'll rot. I know I said it doesn't rain here often. I meant during the summer. Right now, it's rained about 2 days, so it's actually rained quite a bit. But in the summer, rain can be pretty rare. Maybe once a week, maybe 2 times a week. So that would be the time to grow pintos, but then there's that issue where you gotta water them more, and not a lot of water. Because it doesn't rain. So yeah, it's kind of tricky. I guess one thing that might do okay is what might do okay? Grass. Grass does wonderful. Certain types of grass, they do really well. That I've noticed that quinoa and amaranth doesn't do too bad if you get lucky with it. I haven't quite figured out a science to it yet, but it doesn't seem to do too bad, which is quite a feat. Esperanza. There's an interesting deal with the Esperanza. So if you grow Esperanza and you water it with the hose water, it will die. But if you grow Esperanza and you let the rain water it, and you let the humid air water it, and you refuse to give it hose water, it will live. It's a very strange plant. It seems to dislike hose water. Well, that's all for now. So thank you so much for tuning in. If you're watching live, thank you so much for watching the VOD. If you're watching the VOD, and if you could check out the link in my description. It's a charity that helps out with saving the sea turtles. And that's all for now. Goodbye.